All right. Good morning, friends. So good to see so many beautiful people first thing on a Friday. Very excited to be with everyone for our second installment of the Reverse Book Club. So, if this is your first time joining us, the Reverse Book Club is the brainchild of our CEO and operating principal, Scott Phillips, where he or I will read a book so that you don't have to. And so, what we're going to go over today is a breakdown, the top takeaways, the cliff notes, if you will, of the book Switch: How to Change Things When Change is Hard. I'm sure everybody on this call or that will be watching it later can appreciate the fact that change more often than not is hard. So, really fantastic book by a couple of outstanding authors. Chip and Dan Heath have done a lot in the world of change management and understanding behavioral psychology. And so, this one of their best books covers a few different things as it relates to how and why change is hard, and then what we can do to overcome those things. So today's session will be interactive. We're going to take examples and stories and anecdotes from a bunch of different industries, and you can choose whatever framework you want to apply them to. It could be, whether it's change management and creating change inside of your household, inside of your business, inside of your community, or any other subset of the entire universe that you want to impact change on. So we'll need some participation. We'll need some ahas periodically. This is going to be broken up into just a few different sections. So Nancy, please pay attention if you can't. I'm just kidding. So we're going to go ahead and dive right in to this, and I want to set a framework on, first of all, for the environments that we are operating in. And this actually isn't expressly covered in the book. However, it is a great backdrop to understand and appreciate and become aware of what the ecosystem or the atmosphere that we operate in, what exactly is it that makes change sometimes challenging. And so if you watch the promo for this session, you would have heard me describe VUCA, right? Which is an acronym commonly used in the paramilitary sector to describe embattled parts of the world. But VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, right? And so if we stop and think about a time where change was hard or the situation was particularly challenging, I'm sure that we can tie it back to one of these four components of the VUCA environment. And so each one of these has a very specific cure, right? If volatility is the challenge in your business or in your household or in your community, then you want to seek paths to create predictability, right? And we'll hear a couple examples of how that's done later today. If your environment is uncertain, right? The atmosphere that you're operating in is uncertain. You want to bring clarity into play, right? If you can't tell left from right, then bringing clarity to the situation will ultimately help that. And these seem very obvious, but if we do not first become aware and define things out, then we will have a really tough time on our hands when we go to actually getting the results that we want. When complexity is the problem, we will seek simplicity. And of course, when ambiguity is the problem, then we seek definition, right? So whenever you are dealing with a tumultuous situation, when you're dealing with a challenge, when you're up against something, think about the world around you and think about which one of these VUCA elements is going to play into your solution, or what are you solving for as a leader or a business owner in this current environment? All right. The book Switch hammers on a psychological principle that there are three elements that impact behavior. There is a rider, an elephant, and a path. So the rider wants to direct movement, the elephant wants to move, and the path is the space in which that elephant has to move. Right? That's pretty simple, but we're not doing a Jack Hanna Animal Planet thing here. What do those things actually mean? Well, the rider is your brain, right? This is your critical thinker. This is your really smart, hardworking, long-term focused component of your behavior, right? And so your rider can see further, right? And has much more endurance than your elephant. Right? Now, the elephant has a lot of energy. The elephant can take on really big tasks, right? But it can't see but right in front of its face. And it also gets bored and distracted easily. And then finally, the path is the environment around you, right? The space that you are operating in, the path that you're walking along. And when this is a good thing, it keeps motivation. Right? It makes repeated success easier. But in a lot of ways, it's hard for us to control. It's difficult to shape. And the further we wander off the path, the further we let our elephant trample through the brush, the more likely we are to continue to wander off the path, right? And so what we'll go through there are three specific actions or three specific considerations for each one of these elements to change management that we're going to go through today. But first, we have to understand that, hey, our rider is really smart, really hardworking, but they're also really likely to just fall in love with crunching the numbers, or you'll hear the term paralysis by analysis, right? That's your rider taking over, saying, hey, I really want to understand before I move forward. And the elephant is the one who gets bored easily, right? It can be disruptive, right? Is your emotional components acting out in response to a situation. And then your path is everything around you, from the way you set up your bedroom to your morning commute to the place settings at a dinner table, right? All of those things are there. So how we control and what we control in terms of our path we'll cover as well. So first, we'll start with directing the rider, right? So the first thing that we want to do to direct the rider, because they're incredibly interested in the world around them. They can see more, right? And this, again, is the analytical part of our brain. The first thing that we want to do is find the bright spots, right? Because if we're taking on a large change initiative, right, then we as humans, based on thousands of years of evolution and the fact that we used to get attacked by animals in the wilderness, right? We are inclined to go find the bad things, right? Find the bad things first and avoid them, right? If our child brought home a report card with 5 A's and 1 B, right? Or at least if Tom Repasky's son brought that report card, right? The focus would be all on the B. Or if I was 5 B's and 1 A, it would not be on the A, it would be on all the B's. But the first thing that we have to do to not overwhelm our riders, right, with information is to find the bright spots. So they give a brilliant example of this in the book. They talk about a mission trip that was made to Vietnam, right? And this is in the 1980s that the mission trip took place. And these individuals were affiliated with the government, and they were charged with solving a malnutrition problem among the Vietnamese youth in rural counties, right? So, they're that's a pretty big problem because there's a massive disparate population throughout the rural counties. You have major infrastructural challenges like no running water, access to clean water, access to healthcare, access to food source, all of these rampant poverty, right? Low quality of living. All of these things are factors that are playing into the malnutrition of children in Vietnam. So the individuals that were responsible for taking on this challenge, the first thing that they did is they went and surveyed all of these different families and took the height and weight of every child across, 6 different communities. Because what they wanted to identify was, well, who are the kids that are actually healthy, right? Who are the kids who aren't malnourished? Because it's not 100%, it's 75%. So what's happening in the households where the kids are well nourished and are growing at the rate that they should be? And then, so that is the definition of finding the bright spot, right? Because your writer wants to think about like, oh my gosh, okay, so we need roads, we need infrastructure, we need a civil engineer to plan out these cities. Why do they live so far away? Like you want to go into big, sexy, moving the tectonic plates of change, but zeroing in on like this kid's healthy. Why? Right? And so again, for your own change management, if you are looking at your team or your business, right? Oh, I've lost 2 of my last 5 listing appointments, right? Well, there might be a question to why am I losing these 2, but to keep your writer, to keep your analytical brain from going down the rabbit hole of the failure and focusing on the bad is, why did you win the 3 that you won? And how do we start replicating those experiences, right? So instead of avoiding pain, right? Any bold graduates, this sound familiar, right? We're going to pursue pleasure, right? Or pursue the good, not focus on the bad, right? Now, as it relates to the story about the Vietnamese children, what they found was the mothers in those households were feeding their kids multiple times a day. They were providing them with sources of protein through little pieces of shrimp and different greens that were only considered appropriate for adults, right? So you had this thing that was happening where children were being nourished well, and it wasn't that these people had access to different resources or they had access to different things. They were feeding the kids multiple times a day instead of at morning and at evening, and they were providing them with different foods, right? In this case, it was bits of shrimp and bits of greens that were considered only appropriate for adults. And so that is then a replicable piece of change that every single individual can do, right? So they found the bright spot and then they moved forward. And so that takes the second thing that your writer needs to really benefit from a change standpoint and to be under control is to script the critical moves, right? And so again, the writer is really, really smart. You are all really, really smart. At least one half of your brain is, right? And really wants to analyze and engage with every single possibility, right? The other thing that your writer can do is not want to make any movement until it understands everything that could possibly happen, right? And so whenever we give a writer a lot of information, we get the paralysis analysis, right? We want to spend all this time thinking and none of this time doing. And so one of the studies or one of the things that they observed in the book around this specific thing was the fewer options that are given, the better decisions are made, right? And so they use the example of individuals who they had one medication left as an option to solve a medical issue. So we have one medication left that we haven't tried, or we have to do surgery. In those situations, 78% of the doctors said, let's try this one more medication, right? Now, in the same scenario with 2 medications left to try, the doctors opted into surgery, right? So when given the opportunity to do one more thing or the next thing, right? These doctors were able to pursue the least invasive and hopefully most successful path. But when given a lot of least invasive, potentially successful paths, and then one what would be considered more invasive but more certain path, they chose certainty, right? And so depending on the number of options given, our decision will be impacted. So for our writers, we want to, for our brains, right? We want to limit the number of options so that we are not overstimulating the analytical elements of our brain, right? And so, again, think about this with your business, right? There are tons of different lead generation methods. And you could cold call, you could farm, you could flyer, you can hold open houses, you can buy leads on the internet, you can buy referral only, you can door knock, whatever it is, right? If you try to do all 10, right, you are going to spend your time thinking about which one to do. That is your writer taking over saying, well, it's really nice out today. I bet nobody's going to be home. So I'm going to take door knocking off the table, but then maybe flyering's good because I'll want to be outside. And then by noon, you won't have any appointments. You won't have generated any leads, and your writer will be very happy to continue thinking about what we could do tomorrow. So here, we want to make sure that we are scripting our critical moves, and we want as few as possible and as simple as possible. Right? Albert Einstein was very, very intelligently quoted as saying things should be as simple as possible, but not simpler. Right? And so when you think about for you and for all of the options that you have in every day, right? Whether it be with a dinner menu or who to call next, right? We want to script our critical moves so that we don't give our writers the opportunity to lock up the brakes on progress. And then the final thing that we do with our writers to get them under control and to keep them under control is point to the destination. And this is a really, really fantastic thing to do because it ties in a ton of the stuff that we teach organizationally around goal setting and visioning and where do you want to be in 5 years. But it also helps stretch the horizon of your writer so that they know where they're going, right? So we're finding bright spots that allow them to lock in and understand success. Then we're scripting only the critical moves, right? I will call from 9 to 11. I will call my A's on Mondays, my B's on Tuesdays, my C's on Wednesdays, right? Whatever it is, we're taking options off the table. And then finally, we're pointing to the destination. And the way to do this is with what's called a destination postcard. So a destination postcard is a piece, think about a postcard, what fits on there, and then how would you describe where you're going in your change initiative, right? And these should be sticky ideas, they should be sexy ideas, and they should be black and white, right? There can't be a lot of wiggle room in here because as you likely well know, right? We can rationalize away. We are so smart that we will rationalize away our behavior, right? So let's say, I don't know, Allison Benoit and I say that we're going to have only one glass of wine a night, right? And that's totally doable for both of us, right? Now, we might stick to that one glass of wine a night, but how big do you think our glass is going to be? It's probably going to be big enough to fit the whole bottle, right? And so that destination postcard of one glass of wine per night is not black and white enough, right? And it isn't necessarily going to be effective because our writer, we will outsmart ourselves like that. And so, one of the examples they give in the book is in the early 1990s, BP decided that they were going to reduce the cost of pulling a barrel of oil out of the ground from $5 to $1. $1. their way of doing that was to reduce the number of wells that they drilled that were considered dry wells, right? That produced no oil, right? Because even 25 years ago, it was still the explorer's game, right? You got guys out there, smelling the dirt, figuring out whether or not there was oil in it. And then these guys would go sell the wells to BP. So BP came out with a destination postcard that was black and white. And they said, no dry wells. For us to achieve our goals, we cannot miss. It wasn't that they had to have fewer dry wells. It wasn't that they were going to have, no wells or only 1 out of every 5 could miss. It was none, right? And that was the standard. And when it wasn't met, it was considered failure. It could not be rationalized. And so when you set your goals, when you set your destination postcard for your rider, right, you have to disallow wiggle room. You have to disallow the ability to rationalize the situation, because you will invariably find your way out of it, right? So again, to recap the directing the rider piece, and then we'll pop into a little bit of conversation and a little bit of aha here. Find the bright spots, right? Whatever change it is that you are looking to create. I want to win more listings. I want to lose weight. I want to do. I want to wake up earlier. Whatever it is, you are already doing it in some way, shape, or form, or doing something that is directionally correct. So figure out what that is and start to understand, hey, when I wake up early in the morning, what is the scenario? Like, what are the things that led to that, right? Then script the critical moves, right? So you don't have to do 100 things to get to one outcome, right? This is, Vilfredo Pareto, right? The old Italian pea farmer, 80-20, right? 80% of your results come from 20% of your activities. Keep your rider focused on the 20% of the activities, and then finally point to the destination, right? Because your rider, to keep them out of the weeds, to keep their eyes up and down range, we need to focus on where are we going. So let's pause there before we get into the next segment. I'll do ahas, questions, anything that wasn't clear you want to revisit, anything that anything you missed, anything that you're like, oh wow, that's interesting. Just share. Feel free to unmute and share.
Hey, Mike.
Yeah.
Cindy Sobel.
Hey, Cindy.
Hey. I love this fewer options idea. I think it's one of the reasons why whenever I go to trainings or family reunion, it's too much coming at me. My brain gets so overstimulated that I then become paralyzed. So I think that's one of the reasons I always shy away from those types of events, because the way my brain works, it's not a plus for me. It's a minus. It makes me come off of those type of events doing nothing. I really like the virtual family tour. I mean, family reunion this year, because it made me be able to take in the information in pieces and parts so that I could look at it and then choose a couple things and do it. Whereas when you're physically at that kind of event, there's so much coming at you that I don't know what to do with it.
Yep.
So that's so important, that fewer options.
Yeah, it actually, the way you just described it reminds me of, it was either Warren Buffett or Benjamin Graham or Charlie Munger, one of those guys. And they said, hey, figure out the 25 things that you want to do with your life. What are the 25 things you want to get out of life? And make a list. And then rank them. And then take numbers 4 through 25 and forget about them. And just focus on the first 3. Because when you get those first 3 and you have those things in your life, you'll make another list. And there will be 25 things. But if you try and divide up your time, energy, and resources into 25 different buckets, you will then, this must be, it's probably Eric Ukbar here in the chat box under Keller Williams, because he's always policing the Warren Buffett quotes. But if you try and pursue all of those equally, it's unlikely that you will get any of them. But if you pursue just a few, it's likely that you can have whatever you want. Thanks for sharing that, Cindy. Who else had something?
Cindy, I'm with you about the choices and also the paralysis analysis. Um, Sometimes I suffer from, I call it getting ready to get ready.
Oh gosh, yes.
I love to get ready to get ready. Like I'm going to make some phone calls and where's my favorite pen? So I have to find my good luck pen. And then, oops, I'm out of water. And then I can't find my AirPods. And then up the hour and a half that I had scheduled to make phone calls is over. Now I have to go on an appointment.
Totally, Allison. That's
Yep.
totally me. Absolutely.
Getting ready to get ready.
Getting ready to get ready.
Well, and so we'll talk about that. Let's come back to that here in a bit, because that's one part your rider, and it's another part the path, right? And so we'll talk about some of the environmental things that impact that. But nobody is more likely to fall into paralysis analysis than me, and any member of our staff that's on the call can attest to this. If I can't have the conversation if we don't have the last 5 years worth of data in a spreadsheet that I can look at, right? Because I like I almost like I need to have that. It's like Linus with the security blanket, right? But it's really challenging, and so we have to, what helps. I'll tell you what helps in that situation is the destination postcard. We have really clear goals, right? And they're unwavering. Like, we are going to be this profitable. We will be the #1 market center in the world, right? We will earn this, we will have this many agents, right? And so those things, they snap you out of it. They snap me out of it, at least. And so that's a little autobiographical example of where without that destination postcard, my head would be, in the sand, so to speak, or in the weeds at the very least, constantly. All right, let's hear one more and then we'll get on to our elephant. I got nothing till noon, guys, so I can wait.
Where is everybody?
I know. I'm seeing a bunch of faces, and I mean, Nancy's pretending to take notes.
Cindy and I can just keep on talking, that we can fill all empty space.
We'll do this as a trio. What notes did you take, Nancy? Go ahead and unmute and tell us so we can move on. Or type it in the chat.
I can't type that fast. I don't know. Why is it my day today? You're on me today.
I don't know either.
I'm here in every class. I don't hear from you. I don't hear my name. Today is my day. And today I'm busy.
Give us one quick takeaway. What did you learn?
Oh my God. I learned that I better find the bright spots. I better do the right thing immediately and not get ready and not accomplish what I plan on accomplishing. I plan, I'm going to do this today, and I do the same thing we all do, get ready. And that's not so good.
That's right. Find the bright spots is so important, because it actually transitions into the elephant quite well. That several of these will play off of different elements, but finding the bright spots allows you to feel success faster, right? Because the fact that you have 5 F's on your report card and 1 A, right? It seems really daunting to become a straight A student, but there's capacity and there's capability and there's something already happening in your environment, or excuse me, in what you're doing that is producing the result that you want. So zero in on that. Well, what's different about that class? What's different about that teacher? What's different about the way that you study? What's different about the way that you approach the problem? And then how do you replicate that?
Mike, can I say something real quick?
Yeah, absolutely, Art.
So, and that's so interesting that you're teaching from this book, and like what Nancy said and what you just mentioned. There was a time years ago, I never read the book, but there was a time years ago when I was going through something very challenging. And what I would do is a lot of things were going wrong, but I would tell myself and like trick myself to focus on the really good things. And I would have very positive self-talk. I mean, I could do something so small, so minor, but I would tell myself, that's a good job, or good guy. That's a good job, that boy. And so I would do that. And then what I did is, and I kept doing it, the confidence built. And then I began to build upon those small victories. And I began to work myself out of that situation. And I really, it's like tricking myself to believe I was doing better than what I really was. And what happened is I actually started doing better and came out of that situation and out of that circumstance and came to a better place. And so, I mean, like right along with the lines of rewiring the brain, you know, with neuroplasticity and rewiring your brain and shaping the way you think and just changing everything about yourself, your whole life, because of the way you think. And you can just be out of a bad situation into a much better place because you just taught yourself, you focused on the good things. And it was almost as if you were lying to yourself. I mean, that's what it seemed like because so much is going wrong. And you just build upon it. I mean, work was working and just build upon that. Like, I mean, I'm not going to take over, but like the Chinese in table tennis, they teach them and say, don't worry about your weakness. Let's focus on your strength. And let's build your strength so great that you're just unbeatable because every time we're trying to work on your strength to beat your opponent. And that's what they do. They overcome their opponent.
Absolutely. And that's a beautiful transition into this elephant, because the first thing that you know, there are three things that you do to motivate the elephant, right? So you're going to direct the rider and you want to motivate the elephant, right? Because this is your emotional engine, right? And so you want to be highly motivated. You could know, I mean, how many times have we, I mean, shoot, guys, we know what we need to do each day to grow our business, but sometimes, like even if you know everything else was you know, perfectly set up, sometimes you are not motivated, right? You don't want to do it, you don't feel like you can do it, whatever it is. And so the first thing that we do to motivate the elephant is find the feeling, right? So everything that's appealing to the rider is unappealing to the elephant, right? And vice versa a lot of the times, right? So all of this, we're going here and we're gonna call this person and call this person and call this person and get a listing and do this presentation and do this thing. You've scripted the critical path, you know where you're going. And I mean, guys, we got to make it a little bit sexier for our elephants, right? We have to find the feeling of who am I going to be? What is it going to feel like? What am I most excited about, right? And so they give this example in the book. There are, you know, it's a little bit of a rough read. It's about kids that have, you know, kids that are diagnosed with and treated for cancer at a young age, right? These are teenagers. And what they, you know, all of the rationality, right, that is available in the universe for why you need to take your medicine, right, for a cancer survivor exists, right? And these kids would be lectured to and taught by their physicians about how to take and when to take and why to take their medicine. And whether it was just teenagers being teenagers or whatever it was, right? Maybe the elephants are bigger for teenagers and the riders are smaller. They, you know, these kids wouldn't do it, or they were doing it at an alarmingly low rate, like something like 27 or 37%. And so what they did was they created a video game where kids were, you know, they were this nanobot that was flying through the bloodstream and shooting cancer cells, right? And it came with all these educational installments about like, hey, this is, you know, this is what chemo is, or this is what this medication is, or this is why this is important, right? And they had, you know, 25 levels, and it was everything that they were going to learn from their physicians. They could just play the game, and what do you know? Kids started to, you know, have their participation in their own medicine or their own medical treatment, right? They started taking their medicine, doing the things they should do at a rate of over 80%. And they're like, wow, man, this video game must be, that's the unlock. It's the bee's knees. We got this. And what they found was kids played like 2 levels. They only played 2 levels. on average, and they were 3 times more likely to take the medicine, right? Because their riders already knew. It was the elephant that needed to be motivated, and the conversation around finding the feeling was for these specific individuals, and for us sometimes, was this idea of ownership, right? Was the identity, right? Or the feeling of control that came when they started to identify with this character in the video game. They suddenly realized that they were in control, right? If you've ever had or know someone who has had that horrible disease, then you know that control is something that is sometimes heavily impacted. And so the science side of this is that change does not come from analyze, think, and then change. That is not how change works. Change is see, feel, then change, right? And the encapsulating comment, write this down, is that you are more likely to act yourself into thinking than to think yourself into acting. You are more likely to act yourself into thinking than to think yourself into acting, right? When we behave a certain way, we feel a certain way, and we want to continue to behave that way. Otherwise, we could just think and lose weight, right? Think yourself thin. That's my next book. We will have, it'll be, I think that could be pretty well attended. It might make me rich if I could actually pull that off. But the idea here is that for our elephants, like, they need to know what is the positive emotion, what is the emotion that we are going after, right? And so find the feeling, right? And whether it's with your people or whether it's with your children or your neighbors, right? What is it gonna feel like to drive down this street when everybody cuts their grass twice a week? What is it gonna feel like, right? To be the number one agent in the number one office in the number one market in Northeast Ohio, right? What is it going to feel like? What's it going to smell like? How's the beer going to taste? Like, your elephant needs to know these tactile things that are waiting for it at the end of the path. The second thing we do for our elephants, right? Because our riders love this big open skyline, right? Take them to Montana, big sky country. They get to think big and do big, right? Well, your elephant wants you to shrink the change, right? And they want to feel like it's just a couple steps down the path, right? And one of the funniest, they give this, and when I say this, you're probably going to think like, oh my God, I've fallen for this, right? And that is they use this example in the book around, they take 2 sets of people and they all go to the same sandwich shop, and you buy a sandwich and they hand you a card and they say, hey, you every 10 sandwiches after this one, you get a free sandwich, right? And then for the other group of people, they come in, they get a sandwich, and they hand them a sandwich card, and it says, hey, for your 10 sandwiches, you get a free sandwich. And oh, by the way, we punched the first 3 for you, right? Now, the people who had the first 3 punched, the first group only had 7 punches to get a free sandwich. The second group needed 10, but had the first 3 punched. So the same number of sandwiches need to be bought in the future to get a free sandwich. The second group, who had the 3 already punched on the 10 punch card, were 3 times more likely to redeem for a free sandwich. And it's because they felt like they were already ahead in the game, right? And this is the sandwich equivalent of in your fitness journey, right? Laying out your clothes the night before to go to the gym in the morning, right? Because when you wake up, the clothes are already out, I guess I'll go, right? They're not stuck away in the drawer, the shoes aren't in the closet and all these other things, right? But what we're doing is we're shrinking the change necessary. And so the other example they'll give is the 5-minute cleanup, right? So when you never try to clean your whole house because it's exhausting, and your elephant, unless you're some sadistic person who loves to clean, then your elephant will tire immediately, right? And so, the example that they give is, you set a 5-minute egg timer, and you just clean as much of one room as you can in 5 minutes. And that makes the task small enough for your elephant to actually go at it full bore. And, this weekend, try it. And if you only clean for 5 minutes, let me know. But there's a pretty good chance that you will, like 99% of the other population, your elephant will get 5 minutes down the path. You'll start to see progress, right? And then that momentum will carry you forward, right? But if you say like, yeah, I've got 2.5 hours set aside on Sunday to clean the house, there is a high likelihood that you will clean for 0 minutes. But if you just clean for 5, you might clean for 50. And then the third thing that we do for our elephants is grow them, right? To motivate the elephant, we have to grow the person, right? So we're shrinking the task. It's small, it's easy. And then when we grow the people, we're really talking about giving someone an identity to live up to, right? And providing them with the opportunity to be a better person, right? Dale Carnegie in 1935, in his book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, said that we should give a dog a good name, right? And then it'll be a good dog. This is very similar. When we give our people, when we give our spouses or our children or our neighbors or our colleagues or our team leaders a good name, right, and give them a good identity to live up to, they tend to do it, right? Because people want to behave in a consistent manner, right? If we tell bad kids that they're bad, they'll continue to be bad, right? And this goes, we can circle all the way back to finding a bright spot, celebrating them, rewarding them, repeating behavior, and then giving them an identity to live up to. In the 1990s, there was a small island in the Caribbean, British Virgin Islands, actually, St. Lucia. And St. Lucia has this, first of all, it's gorgeous. There's a very, very delicious beer there called the Piton. It's only bought and sold and made on that island. But that's not the story here. The story is about the St. Lucian parrot, right? So this is a gorgeous parrot that only exists on that island. I mean, this is the stuff of Charles Darwin's dream, right? And in the 1990s, this bird, there were less than 100 left on the island because they were being poached, because they were being killed, despite all of these laws, whether or not they were enforced, that prohibited people from doing it, right? And so you're talking about less than 100 of this bird are left. Now, in the last since 1998, so in a span of 6 years, they completely eradicated the poaching of this bird. There are now over 800 on the island, and we're north of 20 years since any one of these birds has been poached or killed for food. So what changed? Well, what the major initiative for the island of St. Lucia was that they gave that bird an identity and tied it to the identity of their people. So they started referring to the St. Lucian parrot as our bird, right? This is our bird. It started to show up on license plates and driver's licenses, and it was a reoccurring character on like a sitcom, and they just started to integrate it into the population and started to, I think I have this section highlighted. I want to give you some of the quotes. Like, St. Lucians were taught that they were the kind of people who protected their own, right? Now, how often do we see this in our families, right? Or in our communities, right? you know, even in simple ways like East Siders, West Siders, you know, and stuff like that. But in really positive ways, when we start to tie our identity to the fact that we don't kill this bird, right? The change happens almost overnight, right? Because as we'll talk about in just a few minutes, there's this herd effect, right? Where if it's not something we do, it's not something we do. And we police that. And this is a big build of culture, right? I think about it in the way that we talk to one another as members of Keller Williams Greater Metropolitan. It is very rare that you hear somebody talk about how are your deals going or how are sales. The question most often overheard in the office is, how's your business, right? I had breakfast with one of our agents this morning and we talked primarily about profitability, right? And so it is an identity that you are not a realtor only, you are a business owner that happens to be a realtor, right? That is if I look at this autobiographically and I say, how are we doing or where do we have opportunities? It is in our creation of culture. And as we endeavor to create culture, when we treat people like business owners, right? And then our people start to think like business owners and they start to think about beyond the deal, right? Because what happens is there's this V-shaped path for your elephant that it is very scared to go down, right? But if we can tell them, growing your people starts with growth mindset, and that growth mindset says it's okay to fail. And so that's another thing that your elephant needs to know, because we start out up here really high with optimism, right? We're going to do this, right? I'm going to be $1 million real estate agent. And then we have this reality and hard work segment that kind of brings us back down to earth, and we start losing some listing appointments. We start to feel like maybe I'll just be a $500,000 or $100,000 real estate agent, right? But nobody wrote that book. But then as we continue to work through, if we continue to motivate the elephant, if we've got a good destination postcard and we know where we're going, as we have wins and we're successful, we build confidence, right? And we end up more confident than we were ever optimistic, right? But the elephant needs to know that their identity, right, when they go through this bottom section here, their identity is what's going to pull them through based on the way that they act. So that's where the growth comes from, that you are not your last deal. You are not your last listing appointment. You are not your last transaction. You are a business owner. And there are a lot of people who drive by a McDonald's on their way to a Burger King every day, and it doesn't mean McDonald's fails. All right, so that's the elephant section. Who's got ahas or questions or follow-ups or, oh my gosh, this is really interesting. What do you got?
Mike.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Polly.
Hey, you. I have two things that are a takeaway from this. And I've seen the feeling in a change when I'm working with clients, when I take the math and break it down to the simplest form. So if they're looking, as say a seller is or a buyer is looking to increase his offer and they're worried about their basic bottom line, what's their house payment going to be? And I tell them that the additional $3,000 is just $7 per thousand. Is 21 bucks a month. How many times a month do you go to Starbucks? I never knew today, but that I recognize by this, the feeling in their faces and the feeling in their posture, they relax a bit and they're like, yeah, we can do that. So it makes sense in breaking it down to the smallest increment that it's doable.
Yeah, and think about this. Think about this script, Polly. Right? Hey, Jason. This is $7 per thousand. Right? That's one Starbucks a week. Are you willing to give up one Starbucks a week to be a homeowner? Right? And now we pulled in that identity, right? You're a homeowner, right? It's one of the most noble things you can do is own a home, be a part of a community, right? Build it up as big as you want. And at it, shoot, $70 at that point. He'll never step foot in Starbucks again.
No. And you know what? I think now that you just flipped that script at me, I think that's where I'm not completing the script with them is you'll be a homeowner at $7 per thousand. How does that feel to you? And
Yeah.
that's the part of the script that I think was missing now that we just role played. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, right. It's great. It's right here on the cover of the book. It's not about the money, it's about being the best you can be, right? It's about who you become. It's not about what you do, it's about who you become. That is the sexy thing about goals, right? You get to be somebody. All right, give me another one and then we'll move on to shaping the path.
Hey, Mike, it's Cindy again.
Hey, Cindy, how are you?
Okay. I love this. This is really impactful here. That shrink the change that is necessary. I love the fact when you're saying elephant wants you to shrink the change. So I'm saying instead of like trying to buck up against the elephant that's within you, you give him what he wants by taking the task and chunking it down. Because now you're giving him what he wants, so he won't yell at you anymore and try to steer you off path because you're giving him what he wants.
That's right. That's right. I mean, the one of the examples they give is like, somebody who wants to get into better shape. Well, you don't go work out at the gym for an hour, right? Just go swipe, just check in at the gym. Check in at the gym and leave, right? It's just like, whatever it is that counts as the win, and you go reward yourself. That's great, but once that elephant gets moving, like that's the beauty of shrinking the task is that the elephant will stomp on it and they'll stomp on the next one and stomp on the next one, right? And then once it gets moving, now we're cooking with gas, right? Now we have momentum, right? And that's what we're building. And then you couple that with the identity, right? The identity component of who you get to be, and then the rider just gets to look at their destination postcard and get really excited about what the world's going to look like when we hit all of our goals and all the numbers they're going to get to crunch. All right, awesome. So let's move into this third component, which is shaping the path, right? Going to shape the path. So the very first thing that we focus on in the shape the path is tweaking the environment, right? It seems like it could be the only thing, but tweaking the environment is the first thing. And we probably know probably know a lot of examples, so we've probably heard things that we could do. They give this example in the book that it hit a little too close to home for me. And they did this experiment with moviegoers, if you guys can remember what it's like to go to the movies. It's been a while. And they gave them these enormous, they gave some of them an enormous bucket of popcorn. And they gave other folks a still enormous but slightly smaller bucket of popcorn, right? And then they gave other folks a smaller but still more popcorn than anybody could eat in a sitting, buckets of popcorn. And this was not good popcorn. This popcorn had been in the popcorn maker for days. It was stale. It might as well have filled it up with styrofoam packing peanuts, right? Now you would think that people would invariably like take a bite of this popcorn and then not eat it. Or because nobody could eat all of the popcorn in one sitting, that everybody would eat roughly the same amount of popcorn. That, in fact, was not the outcome. What took place was that the bigger the container, the more popcorn was eaten by a dramatic amount, right? The people with the biggest amount of popcorn, which was unlimited, but just in a bigger container, ate 53% more popcorn and put their hand in the bucket 21 more times than the people who had an unlimited amount of popcorn, but was in a slightly smaller container. And so what does that tell us? It tells us that, given unlimited amount, our environment still impacts us, right? Because if there's seemingly more for us to do or more for us to eat, we will eat more, right? The oldest dieting trick in the book is put your dinner plates in the closet and eat off your salad plates, right? Because I don't know what household you grew up in, but in mine, you could not get up until the plate was finished. And that probably installed some bad habits that expanded my waistline in the last 5 years, right? Because I am a card-carrying member of the Clean Plate Club and always will be. So whatever is on the plate will be eaten, right? So what's the trick there? You just use smaller plates. and you know, unless you're me, and then you go back for multiple servings. But we run into environmental impacts every single day, right? I mean, Marty, how many times do you have to open up Nancy's pills because she can't work through the child-proofing cap, right? Like that child-proof cap is, just kidding, Nancy. That child-proofing cap is an environmental component that the world has put in place, right? So we want to create an environment, right, that facilitates good things, right? Like kids not opening up bottles or opening up the lower cupboards, right? We childproof those and we put little covers over things. Those are all environmental, right? And so when you think about, you know, all the things that all the things that you would do, right, to protect your child, what are the things that you need to do to protect yourself from yourself, right? Or from your, you know, from a path standpoint, from the elephant going off the path, right? What do those things need to be? How do you bulletproof or childproof your lead generation time, right? So now we're, you know, back to Allison and Cindy that they want to go fill up their water. They want to get their favorite pen. I want to scroll through the phone and, oh, I got to better check Facebook first so I can see what happens before I call this person, right? So what does it look like if there is a space in your home or office where, you know, there's always a bottle of water. Your pen is always there. What if the night before you've printed out the list of people you're going to call, right? And you check their Facebook the night before, right? So that it is not interfering with that. Well, that just changes. That's an environmental change, right? So that when you walk into that room, there's literally nothing else to do, right? I worked with, in a previous sales job, I worked with a guy who would only make sales calls from his desk phone, right? Because if he tried to make them from his cell phone, every time he picked up his cell phone, he would look at something else. And so, you know, if you remember what a desk phone looks like, right? It's just numbers. There's not even a screen. So he's got a list of people to call. He's got a list of, and he's got a phone to do it with, right? And as soon as he was done, he could go play on his cell phone, which was great. And he'd make his 15 to 20 calls a day. And then that was his sales day, right? But he built that environment for himself where everyone else is running around texting and trying to call and Facebook messaging, and he just 20 calls a day, right? So what are the tweaks to your environment that facilitate the right behavior, right? And they facilitate the right behavior by making the bad behaviors hard, right? This isn't don't tell Timmy to stick a fork in the electrical socket. This is put a cover on the electrical socket so Timmy can't stick a fork in it. Doesn't necessarily make success easy, but makes failure hard. That's the goal of the environment. It makes failure hard. The second thing that we will do is start to build habits, right? And so this is where, from an environmental standpoint, if it's the same thing in the same place and the same activity at the same time every day, right? That's how a habit forms. Habits are incredibly important because they do not provide the writer, right? They don't provide your analytical brain with anything to think about, right? And we've got lots of great habits, right? Most of us bathe every day. Hopefully all of us do if we're coming into the office, right? COVID was a weird time. Hopefully we're over that, over the 6 days in the same sweatpants thing. But when we look at our habits, you know, we get up, we brush our teeth, we comb our hair, we take a shower. Those are all habits. We don't think about those things, and we don't even have to be particularly motivated to do them, right? And that's the other thing, is that these are things that are like, give the elephant a little bit of a running start, right? When you get up, brush your teeth, shower, shave, have a cup of coffee, right? You're already moving into the day, right? So what are the other habits that can be formed, right? And now think about this. Whenever you're forming habits or building habits, you don't put brush teeth on your to-do list, right? So don't put the things that you want to be habits on a to-do list, and maybe set the whole to-do list thing aside. What you want to think about is your action triggers, right? When this happens, I'll do this. When I get out of bed in the morning, I drink a glass of water and I brush my teeth, right? The action trigger is waking up. The action is brush my teeth, drink a glass of water. When I, when I get a lead, I will do these three things, right? I will use this script. I will put into command. I will set up on neighborhood nurture, right? So the things that you want to be automatic, you want to be systemic, right? Don't set out and say like, oh, I want a system to do this, right? And I'm going to do this system every day. But instead say, when this thing happens, my action trigger, I will then do these things, right? And then that's how you start to automate, and you keep your rider out of saying like, oh my God, this person called and they want to see a house. What do I do? Oh my God, I just got an ROC with a ton of stuff on it. What do I do? Right? Like when those things pop into your brain, I mean, you want to analyze, oh, I'm going to have this argument 6 times in the shower before I actually have it with the person, right? That's the rider taking over, right? Instead, from a habit formation standpoint, we're shaping our path here. We are going to say, when X happens, I will do Y. And then you'll do Y. And it'll be probably exhausting initially. But if you always have that action, it's the Pavlovian response, right? That's what we're trying to replicate from a behavioral standpoint. And then the final thing that we do to shape the path is we rally the herd, right? And so this is, we as humans, despite the efforts of the last 358 days, 359 days. I guess last year was a leap year. So we are 7 days out from the 1-year anniversary of the onset of lockdown, right? But we are social creatures, right? We take our social cues from each other. If you are not a very fancy person like me, right? And you've gone to a fancy dinner party, and you have seen the wide array of forks and plates and spoons and saucers and drinking glasses, you could be intimidated. But what do? What do we do in a situation like that? You just look around and you do what other people do, right? And this is inherently one of the biggest influencers on our outcomes. And this is, as we talked about before, this is culture defined, right? And so they do these studies where even if people are spread far and wide away from each other, the people that we consistently communicate with, we are the same weight, similar weight. We eat similar foods. We have similar routines to the people that we just talk to on the phone regularly, right? So if you have 5 fit friends, you are more likely to be fit than fat, even if you never see them. Because you're taking subconscious or conscious cues on what are they doing? What am I doing? What are they eating? What am I eating? Right? This is the same reason that have you ever been the first person in Starbucks and you see that there's already like $7 in the tip jar? And you're like, what? But is that yesterday's? No, the barista is preceding the tip jar to let you know, from a social cue standpoint, that you should tip because other people tip, right? And then, the great example is fashion trends, right? This is a herd effect, right? I had sideburns in high school because all my buddies had sideburns, and we thought that was real cool. The herd can be pretty damaging, actually, in full effect. But look, we're always looking for clues. And I want to go back to the example of like the child-proof caps or putting the covers on your electrical outlets to keep little Timmy from sticking a fork in it. When I was a kid, at least, and I imagine that a lot of you had a similar experience, when I was very young, 5, 6, 7 years old, I could play with every kid in the class, right? Everyone was my friend. And then as I got to be like 11, 12, 13 years old, my mom was like, well, you can play with some of the kids, but not all the kids. I don't want you to be friends with these kids, right? And that was mom controlling my herd, right? And so, that was the first representation of you are the average of the 5 people around you, right? If we all heard that little trope, right? But that's mom influencing that, right? So I want you to just take a step back and say, if your mom knew everything about the people that you were exposed to on a regular basis right now, like who would she tell you couldn't hang out with? And would that have a positive impact on your outcome? And so we now have to be our own mom in this scenario and say, hey, these are business people. These are people involved in the community. These are talented people. These are untalented people. Who do I want to spend my time with? These are motivated, dedicated. These are values aligned, whatever it is, right? But like, we get to choose our herd, right? And I think that we're all very, very lucky to be a part of this organization, to have been a part of an organization that people have built that has attracted a very large herd, but also one that's heavily values aligned and one that's focused on the right things. But when it comes to this final piece around rallying the herd, how do you rally the herd? And it comes in three phases. It isn't just like which elephants are there, right? It isn't just the picking the right people, but we have to educate, enable, and then activate, right? So educate is just make sure that everybody's aware of the change that we're trying to achieve for ourselves. We're trying to achieve for our community. Like, nope, we're never going to get to the mountaintop if it's not our intention to get to the mountaintop. Then we have to enable, right? So how are we equipping the necessary, elephant rider and path things for everybody in our community? And then finally, we have to activate, right? Which is going to be to get that elephant taking the first few steps. Educate, enable, and activate. So that's it. That's the book, guys. That is Switch, How to Change Things When Change is Hard. What I'd like to do is, first of all, get some ahas on shaping the path, if you would be so kind. And then I would like to, maybe we can do like a little clinic here. I mean, does anyone have anything that like a change that they want to create, and we can all together workshop a little bit of the elephant rider path sort of scenarios here? But first, let's do ahas on shaping the path. Cindy, I saw you going for it.
Yeah, because I have a question here. I thought that creating the environment which facilitates positive and good things. And so for creating the space for your sales calls only, because this is one of my biggest problems is getting sidetracked, even in my office, which is a very small space in my house. That makes me go to work every day and go to another space and close my door and whatever, and now I'm at work. But in my office, there's a lot of distractions as well because of all the technology around me. If I think back, and I'm going to date myself, but when I think back before we had cell phones to the accessibility that we now have them, I mean, there were cell phones when I first started, don't get me wrong, but they were the big ones, the big huge ones.
The bag phone.
Exactly. So we always made our sales calls on a landline. So there literally were no distractions. It was you and the phone, period. That's it. Now we've got these cell phones that are taking little computers with you everywhere you go. And as you're on the phone trying to make your calls, it's pinging and it's doing all this stuff. How do you keep yourself from getting drawn down those rabbit holes to continue to make your calls?
Yeah. I mean, there's always the option of the landline. I don't
have one of those in my house.
No. Okay, well, I mean, you know, you're more modern than me. I still got the hookup at my house. Maybe I'll get one and make them there.
You are
Well, I
really,
think that, look, there's a few things specific to the cell phone, right? Because that's our environment a lot of time. That's the path that we do business on, right? So a few things that I do periodically, I will go through and I will audit the apps on my phone. And so I will count the number of apps that I have on my phone. And I will then get that number. Let's say I have 120, right? I'll delete half the apps on my phone. Because I promise you, if you have 120 apps on your phone, you are not using 120 every month. And you know, we're right here in the world of 5G now. If you needed the app in a hurry, maybe you needed 3 minutes, you wait 3 minutes for it to download, right? So you take all that stuff off your phone, and then you organize it into folders. I don't know if you can see that.
yeah, I have
So
that.
that I only go certain places for certain things, and then turn off all notifications, right? Because it's the pinging, it's the buzzing, it's the push that says somebody liked my comment on Facebook, that draw me in, right? This device is designed to hold your attention. It's not designed to help you do business. It's not designed to help you reconnect with friends. It's not designed to be your CRM, right? The model here is that you stay on this thing as long as possible, right? And so the path here that we shape is we turn off notifications, we delete apps, we dumb it down, right? And we use it to call.
How do you, the two things that, the apps aren't really my problem. It's more the phone calls coming in.
Yep.
So I see another client calling, phone calls coming in, and then I'll
Yep.
get off that phone call of a sales call, and I'll call that person back or whatever to try to solve their problem. So it's either the calls or the voicemails or the texting. How can you make those not come up on your screen? Can you?
I don't know about that one, but let's talk about, if you can't, what is the solve, right? And so maybe there's an action trigger in there from a habit standpoint, that if you set out to do your lead generation in the morning and you have 20, you're going to make your 20 dials a day, right? You're going to call 20 people, and you get to calling, and someone calls while you're on the phone, right? You're just going to have a little yellow pad of paper in your bunker where you're lead genning, and you're going to write that person's name down. And they get to be called back tomorrow or this afternoon, right? Because like, you just need it to go somewhere so that your elephant knows, like, that's a shiny object, right? That's the equivalent of Alan walking in asking you a question, right? And you get distracted, and then you go do that, and okay. But if it can land somewhere where you know that I call these 20 people from 9 to 11, and then I call anybody on this list from 11 to 12, right? You've given it a space, right? You've given the rider and the elephant, right, a place to go later to deal with that, okay. Right? Because when we start reacting, right, we get off the path, we get on the path, and then, you know, oh my gosh, I only called 3 people today. Well, let me get ready to call the other 17 tomorrow, and I'll call 37. So I got to reorganize. Then your rider's just like, yeah, come on, man, let's retool this calendar. Let's open up some white space for tomorrow. And then, you know, you've spent your day letting a couple of phone calls distract you. Thank
you. That's a good suggestion.
Yeah, that's a great question.
It's also a discipline to not jump.
Yeah, which is which is, you know, the look, it's the challenge of humans, right? We've grown up and evolved to react to things for our own safety.
Thanks.
Yeah. Who else has something? Thank you for that. That was great. Anyone else have anything else that they're trying to accomplish? Like, hey, yeah, Mike, 20 calls a day sounds great, but I'm not doing that. Or what is the, you know, hey, I'm having a real hard time with this piece of my life or my business or whatever. I mean, we'll all try and solve it together.
Can I ask one more quick question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so there's that part you were talking about at the end with the choosing your herd and by choosing your herd, you're determining who you're going to become. And then you said there's 3 things: educate, enable, and activate. I got the educate. You're basically going to notify everyone in your herd what you're going to do, so then they can support you and get on board and
Yep.
not work against you all the time, right?
Yep.
What's the enable piece? What does that mean?
The enable piece is to like allow them to do it, right? Like to equip them with the tools to do it. So like if you want to be held accountable by somebody, they need to know how many calls you're making each day. So you're enabling them to hold you accountable, right?
Okay.
Or if it's like, hey, we're gonna be a family that doesn't touch their cell phones during dinner, right? Like we're gonna be the family that has dinner together every night. Okay, what, like, you need to do some things to enable people to do that, right? So maybe like, the kids need screen time for 30 minutes right before dinner and right after dinner, right? So there's no screen time during dinner. So you're enabling that behavior. And then the activation is doing it, right? And that really goes back to the elephant, which is, shrink the task, right?
Thank you.
Yeah. Give me one more and we'll let you out early. Not that you can't leave anytime you want. Oh, somebody's in the chat box. Let's see what that is. Create habits, not to-do list. That's right, Helga. All right, gang. Well, apparently it was so awe-strikingly good that you need no further explanation. Jason Barron, I see you nodding. Gail Growl says, best ever, which I don't know. Scott Phillips shares a wall with me. He's next door. I'll say it. Gail Growl says best ever, which means better than Scott. So, we'll just, small wins, right? All right, guys. If there is anything that I can do to be helpful, if you have any questions, if you want to borrow the book, I've got some highlights in here, some key takeaways. Really enjoyed this. If you could, right now, before we wrap up, drop some stuff in the chat box. What books do you want us to cover, right? This has been a really fun project. It's an excuse to read a book. We get to dive deep. We get to understand something new, and then we save all of our agents' times, right? This is a great way we feel like for us to add value and help you run a little bit faster. So drop some books in the chat box or email me directly if there's a book that you want us to cover. But we really appreciate you guys showing up today, participating, being a part of this, and of course we would always welcome any feedback that you have to make this better. So thank you all so much. See ya.